Morning, guys. My name is Mario Simon. Before I get to my topic, I just want to remind everyone that we probably remember when the Chargers left this year. I'm sure many of us were sad. Probably some of us weren't that sad. The question now is what is to do with the land and what to do with the stadium that once we tear down Qualcomm. Before the Chargers were even left out the door in moving trucks, the mayor and the city was already meeting with potential buyers for the land and what to do with that property. One of these groups was called Soccer City. Jeff McDonald in the Union Tribune of San Diego on May 29th of this year described Soccer City as a soccer stadium up to 30,000 seats, 55 acres of riverfront parkland, along with millions of square feet of offices for retail and condominiums. Now, the question is, where's the money going to come from to pay for this proposed Soccer City, or what else comes on that land? That's why I propose the city and county of San Diego should ban the use of public funds for pro sports stadiums for the future, because the goal of Soccer City is to get an MLS team. Now, my issue is not a professional team coming to San Diego. I love sports, it's great, I love teams. But the issue is the long-term financing for the city. Stadium deals usually don't work out that well for the cities. And I'm going to go over a couple things historically about publicly financed stadiums in other cities. In his 1999 policy analysis called Sportsport for the Cato Institute, it's a policy research think tank, Raymond James Keating estimates that Boston's Fenway Park cost $6 million to build. That's adjusted for inflation. Now, if you look today, or a couple years ago, the Cowboys built their new stadium for over $1 billion. So just like everything else, stadiums are going up. Now, in his analysis, Keating showed that of the 147 stadiums that have been built in the United States using public funds for part of it, since 1960, the average that the cities pay is 60%. And that's never gone down below 60%. And it ranges. And if you go all the way back to 1887 for all publicly financed sports facilities in the country, the average that cities pay is 74%. And it's not just the major sports, this is all their minor league teams and then all the little random leagues across the country that have their own little stadiums. Now, besides the actual city financing for it, there's also a lot of hidden costs that come with the stadiums that they have to pay down the road, things that don't come into the budget when the stadium's actually built. Things like maintenance for the building, upgrading it, retrofitting it for earthquakes, things like that. And other things you may not think about, like additional overtime for police, additional security, things like that. In her 2013 book, Public-Private Partnerships for Major League Sports Facilities, Harvard urban planning professor Judith Grant Long analyzed the 121 stadiums that were in use at the time in 2013 by professional teams, and that she found that it would cost $43 billion to construct all these stadiums. And she forecast that over the life of these stadiums, an additional $10 billion would be needed to pay for these hidden costs that I mentioned earlier. Now, the best evidence that we should not use public funds to build the next stadium whenever it comes for the next team is in our own. It is here in San Diego. It's in our own past. In 1998, the Padres asked for a new stadium in the East Village. At the time, it was a very rundown area of the downtown, and they promised the cost would not hit the city budget. It was a big promise they made. Surprise, surprise. It didn't work out that way. Lisa Halberstadt for the Voice of San Diego, a leading independent news site, wrote back on April 7th of 2015 that an additional $14 million a year was hitting the budget from Petco Park. Reason being is that the reason it wasn't going to hit the city budget was because they were going to collect taxes for the redevelopment of the East Village, and a certain redevelopment agency was going to do that. Well, the state of California suddenly canceled that redevelopment agency, so all the funds had to be paid by the city directly. And some of that $14 million a year was actually earmarked for Balboa Park for maintenance and upgrades. Now, besides the $14 million a year that we have to pay each year for the original construction costs of Petco, there's also going to be years and years of these hidden costs as well for Petco Park. Now, besides the actual construction cost of building the actual stadium initially, you have to start dealing with leases down the road. One big example of this, and the most egregious example of this, was when the Chargers renegotiated their lease back in 1997. Back then, real estate lawyer Rod Carrico wrote for the San Diego Business Journal in January of that year about an odd item he found on page 14. And real quick, back in the day, I don't know if it's changed, if you didn't sell out your home stadium, you would not show the game locally. So I don't know if you guys remember, there used to be times where on Wednesday we'd be freaking out because the tickets weren't sold and they weren't going to show the game on TV. So they made a deal with the Chargers that the city would pay for any unsold ticket for the game. The Chargers sold 70,000 tickets per week, or had 70,000 tickets available for Qualcomm, and they averaged about 55,000 people. If tickets were as low as $20, you times that by 15,000, that's $300,000 a game every week that they were paying when the Chargers were here. For example, if you owned a movie theater and Lucasfilms came to you and said, hey, we want the new Star Wars movie, great, you can't have it, and we're not going to show it unless you sell every seat in the theater for every showing, you probably wouldn't take that deal. So what I propose is some legislation to actually ban this, which I think would be the best thing to do. Now this year actually in Congress, Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, and James Lankford, Republican of Oklahoma, actually set up a bill, or proposed a bill, to ban the use of municipal bonds to finance sports stadiums. Typically municipal bonds is how they finance sports stadiums. It's really boring, I'm not going to go into it. Basically that's how they pay it. Surprise, surprise, it did not pass. Even though it was a very rare bipartisan effort for something. And one reason that they actually brought this to the forefront here in Congress was a report in September 2016 from the Brookings Institute, another policy think tank, excuse me. And they found that $3.2 billion had been used since the year 2000 by using these municipal bonds to build 36 stadiums since 2000. So that's $3.2 billion in taxpayer money. Like I said, it didn't pass, so most likely a ban on public funds would work better on a local level. I would propose to introduce a citywide proposition that we could vote on for this ban. Last year, I don't know if you guys remember, the Chargers had Measure C, which was their last-ditch effort to build a stadium, to get funding for it, and it didn't pass. It didn't pass, wasn't even close. So I think the appetite is there for this kind of a ban. Now, what would this ban give to us? What would be the benefits for this ban? Well, it would be easier for the city of San Diego to do its financial forecasting each year and to make a budget. And the funds that would go to this stadium would actually be better used also if, instead of building a new stadium and helping a new team, we could actually use these funds to expand the convention center, which they've been talking about for years. And it makes more sense to expand the convention center because it runs more events and brings in more people. You know, if you have, for example, a football game, that's 16 games, 8 games at home, that's only 8 events. And I'm sure there's events here and there. But if you have the convention center expanded, you have more events every day with way more people, and they last multiple days. And as you can see, that's even more money. It would also also have a better chance of us keeping the Comic-Con here, which is like a Super Bowl every year in the city. Now, one thing people say when they propose to build a stadium is that the stadium will bring money to the local economy. And that might be true, but it's hard to say. In a 2015 radio piece for public radio show Marketplace, host Ben Bergman spoke with several economists about this issue. And economists actually don't agree on a lot of things, but one thing they agree on is that the benefits of a stadium to a big benefit to the city is not guaranteed. It's kind of hard to gauge. And one reason they say is, one of the reasons that might be is because when you spend money at a stadium, you're not actually spending money in the actual community. The money is going actually to the stadium, to the owners, to pay for the players, to pay for the stadium, to pay for the league costs, things like that. Another reason too is that for everybody that goes to the game and spends money in the stadium, there could be an equal or even greater proportion of people that are avoiding the area because of the gridlock and the traffic, and they don't want to deal with it. Another thing people bring up about having a team or having, when they build these stadiums is that having a team in your city is builds civic pride, and that's true. But there's also other sports teams you can follow around the city, around the area. There are plenty of colleges that have college sports teams. They might not be as exciting as professional teams, but they're pretty good. And UCSD actually just got moved to Division I last week, which is the highest division of college sports. So what we can do, like I said earlier, is try to do a proposition. And you can actually submit a proposition yourself if you like, if you grab a coalition of people. And you can even propose, you can even come forth to a city council member and have them try to do it for you. Now, we're not technically in San Diego, the city, But that doesn't mean you can't go to your local city council member and tell them, hey, if a team's ever thinking about building something here, let's not help them out with funds. For example, in 2009, the Chargers were trying to actually build an Oceanside. I don't know if anyone remembers that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be in San Diego. Plenty of teams play outside of the city that it's actually on their jersey. Sporting events are one of the most unique forms of entertainment in the world. It brings people together and has done so in one form or another for thousands of years. I love sports as much as the next person. I'm a fanatic about it, but I also don't lose sight that these are giant corporations, no different than Coca-Cola and Ford at the end of the day. So as much fun it is for rooting for your hometown team, we must not trade our region's economic stability for it.